Welcome to the Clayton Tyner podcast, where I help you view current issues through the lens of the ancient wisdom of Scripture. This week, famous influencer Logan Paul had his much anticipated boxing match against Jiu Jitsu star and top tier troll Dillon Danis. Danis spent the last 3 months savagely attacking Logan's fiancé online, and yet, before the fight, Logan forgave him. When asked about this, Logan said that Jesus came to him in a meditation. So, who is Jesus to Logan Paul, and what does this mean for his future faith? As the Israel-Hamas war continues on, it's becoming increasingly difficult to get good information on what's happening. This was highlighted when almost every major media outlet reported that Israel destroyed a Gaza hospital, killing 500 innocent people. This reporting has had massive consequence, and it turns out is almost entirely false. So how did the mainstream media get this so wrong? Back at home, the House of Representatives continues to be in disarray as the Republicans struggle to find a new Speaker of the House. A small minority of super conservatives got rid of McCarthy, and now a small minority of more liberal Republicans have voted down Jim Jordan. Should such a small group be able to derail the entire House? And what is the real issue going on in Congress? All that and one look at a viral video from a recent college grad who is outraged that she hasn't been offered a $200,000 a year job. While the video is easy to ridicule, the deeper worldview it points to is really worth paying attention to. We'll look at all that and more on episode 36 of the Clayton Tyner podcast. All right, welcome to episode 36. We made it. I want to appreciate everyone who has been just rocking with us. If you're new to the channel, here on the Clayton Tyner podcast, what we do is we try to look at real world events that are happening around us through a biblical worldview. It allows us to have more nuanced positions and to get out of our echo chambers. I want to give you a little bit of kind of the state of the podcast. Number one, we are growing. Last week, we had the biggest week of growth that we have ever experienced. Wow. Man, I'm just so grateful. I'm grateful for everyone sharing and commenting and even the trolls, all the interesting conversations we're getting to have. I've been going at this now cumulatively for a couple of years. I've really been focused over about the last 6 months. And I know, man, there's a lot of YouTubers out there living in mansions and driving on yachts. Just so you know, so far, all this has done is lose me quite a bit of money.
Wow.
And I'm okay with that because we're kind of building something. And the last thing I want is some kind of charity, right? But there are options out there I've been exploring to create a little more of a community where people can come in, support the channel, support the work that we're doing, and get a value add from the content that I'm producing. And so I'm really, really excited to announce that I have started a Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/Clayton Tyner. The link is in the description. Whether you are an audio only listener, you can still hit the Patreon in the description, or if you're watching on YouTube. And this gives you an opportunity to come in to support the work that's happening here. Again, not trying to get rich, just trying to cover my costs of running the podcast. And depending on how you want to come in, you can get bonus exclusive content that's for Patreon members only, early access to some videos. At a certain tier, you can do a live Q&A every month. I'm going to throw out like a Google Meet where we can all sit together. And instead of me just talking to an empty screen, I'll get to actually talk and interact with you guys, hear what's going on. You can ask questions. We can have great discussions together. I'm so excited about that. And so if you're interested at all, patreon.com/Clayton Tyner. The link is in the description. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast here on YouTube, especially. Most of my energy is going to the YouTube channel. So if you just listen to the RSS feed, make sure you come over at some point to youtube.com/Clayton Tyner. That's Tyner. Without further ado, let's get to today's 3 points. The Logan Paul versus Dillon Danis fight took a nasty turn when Dillon Danis targeted Logan's fiancé with a never-ending barrage of online trolling. In a surprise twist, Logan forgave Dillon before the fight after a meditation where he claims that Jesus actually showed up to him. I was very interested by this news. This took place on his podcast, which is called the Impulsive Podcast. It's a massive podcast, goes out to hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people who listen to it. And in the context of talking about what happened in the lead up to this, he said, I think it was the night before the fight, he went into a meditation with his fiance. He was focused on forgiveness and that Jesus showed up to him. Now, a little bit of background. George Janko, who also has his own podcast now, was a part of the Impulsive crew for a very long time. And George is an outspoken Christian, and he would talk to Logan Paul all of the time about Jesus and scripture and God and how important it is. And Logan has been basically closed off to it. And so this really did come as a surprise. We're going to watch the video, and I am going to be operating over on the censor button. There are some F words, and I'm going to do my best, but I can't make any promises. I'm going to try my best to not let too many slip by. But let's take a look at this episode of Impulsive.
As we knew, was that this guy got under my skin. How could he not? How could any person watch what he did to the person you love most in the world and be okay with it?
Now, I really like that he's admitting, because in the lead up to this, it's a boxing match, it's combat sports, and he never admitted that Dillon Danis actually got under his skin. He tried to play it as cool as a cucumber. I'm thinking the whole time, if someone comes after my wife, for him, his fiance, I mean, that's the shortest fuse that I have. Maybe my kids, my wife and my kids, that's the shortest fuse that I have. And he's admitting that all of this trolling and craziness, it did in fact get under his skin.
I want to actually murder this human being. But as I just described, I'm not that type of athlete. I'm not that type of person. When I lead with aggression and I'm fighting with emotion, I'm not in my best state. And when we did that face-to-face with the glass, he's standing across from me, and I learned that he riles me up. He brings out that side of me that goes, I want to fuck this guy. And that's not good.
Have you tried that though?
I tried, but then I just look stupid throwing wild punches. And then I get caught. I'd get caught with something, and he gets that knockout that the world was waiting for, and it didn't happen. The story was not meant to be written.
So this is important context for what he's going to say about Jesus coming to him. Is Logan is not a fighter who is fueled by aggression. He doesn't fight well angry. In fact, he talks about needing to be kind of calm and in like a good headspace. And I actually understand that. I was a high school basketball player, recruited to go to college, and I could not listen to hype music right before a game. A lot of guys were listening to like death metal or hard rap, something with a super fast BPM to get their heart rate up, to get all fired up and everything. I had to listen to Alicia Keys. I had to listen to John Mayer. I had to Gravity, because if not, I would foul out in 4.5 minutes. Like, I can't go to that level. I would come out way too aggressive and I wouldn't play well. And so I found that interesting, and I really do relate to that.
So I come back to the house and I'm like, damn, it might be harder to flip that switch into calmness and tranquility and fighting with my mind, not my heart, than I thought. How do I do this? So me and Nina sat right over there. We had a meditation. And in this meditation, I'm sitting here, I go, how can I go into this as calm as possible and not want to fight with the emotion? And this word kept coming to my mind: forgiveness, forgiveness,
wow.
Forgiveness. And then, man, y'all are going to laugh at me. The internet's going to laugh at me, but bro, Jesus came into my mind.
Logan Paul is one of the most famous people on planet Earth. And in the lead up to this fight, he says that what prepared him, and if you didn't follow it, he ended up winning the boxing match handily. I mean, absolutely destroyed him. And he came in calm. He forgave him beforehand. And what led him to be able to do that was he had an experience with Jesus. He goes on to explain kind of what his view is of Jesus. And there's lots of F words going to be dropped, so I'm going to do my best to cover that up.
I swear to God.
Yeah. Let's go.
I swear to God, dude. I was like,
What a thing to hear on Sunday,
like,
dude. Out time.
I was like, Jesus is like, the man who is master forgiveness, the power of forgiveness. A whole religion was built on the power of forgiveness, like the amount of followers he has because of this one principle that if you can grasp it, and it's hard to grasp. You know how hard it was for me to go, I forgive you, bro.
So Jesus, who mastered forgiveness, and Logan, who is an influencer, like an OG influencer, one of the very first ones. What is so impressive to him about Jesus, and it's so interesting, he says it this way. It's like, yes, man, he came and he paid the price of everyone's sins forever. Yes, he split all of history into before Christ and after the resurrection, like all of these things he did. But what is most impressive to Logan Paul, look at how many followers he had. Oh, he had so many followers. This guy's Instagram was popping off, man. So many followers. He's the master of forgiveness. Look at the movement that he started. And look, people are going to have all kinds of different opinions about this and what's going on. And Logan has been consistently in proximity to believers who are pushing him to consider there might be a God, and that God might have come to earth and been revealed in the person of Christ. But what I would call this from Logan at this point in his spiritual journey is a utilitarian appreciation of Jesus.
Wow.
A utilitarian appreciation of Jesus. In other words, there is utility in what Jesus has to offer Logan's life, and he can appreciate that about him. He appreciates just the massive world-changing movement that Jesus started. He appreciates, as an influencer, that Jesus is the most influential person of all time. He appreciates, as someone with like 24 million followers on his YouTube channel, almost as big as Clayton Tyner podcast, that Jesus had like the most followers of all time, billions of people on earth right now who follow Jesus. So he appreciates this in a very utilitarian way, and there's something he can get out of it. That Jesus is an example of forgiveness. Jesus fought his battles through a lens of forgiveness. Jesus was victorious. Now Logan Paul can learn to forgive. And through the lens of forgiveness, he can be the most accurate athlete possible when he steps into the ring. And I think this is a wonderful starting place for people. As most of you know, I'm the pastor of Meta Church in San Antonio, Texas. We are on the front lines of ministry because we've created a church that's focused on the unchurched and de-churched. And that's really who we're making space for. And a lot of times people start with this utilitarian appreciation of what Jesus can do for their life. What Jesus knew, because he's God and knows all things, and revealed to us through his teachings and then furthered through the teachings of the apostles in the New Testament, is the way life operates maximally. And so servant leadership was not really a category in the ancient world. Humility was seen as a vice, not as a virtue. Jesus inverts all of these ideas. 2,000 years later, we start learning that servant leadership actually releases chemicals in our brain physiologically that lead to happiness and flourishing. And of course it does, because Jesus showed us how to live 2,000 years ago. Forgiveness is actually releasing ourself from the burden of hurt as much as it is releasing anyone else. A lack of forgiveness, it's been said, is like drinking poison to try and kill the person who harms you. You know, Jesus taught us that so long ago. This utilitarian appreciation of Jesus, if you will stay after it, and if you'll continue following, and if you will seek God with all your heart, and God has promised to reveal himself to you if you do, it will lead to truly appreciating and believing in who Jesus says that he is. Not just a great man, not just a great teacher, but the Savior of the world and the Lord of our lives. There's a really interesting moment. It all takes place in John chapter 6. In John chapter 6, Jesus has traveled with his disciples, and thousands of people show up, and pretty soon they all get hungry. Jesus said, have the people sit down. This is in John 6, verse 10. There was plenty of grass, so they sat down, and the men numbered about 5,000. And they only would count the men, but there were women and children there as well, probably upwards of 20,000 people in attendance. Then Jesus took the loaves, and after giving thanks, he distributed them to those who were seated, so also with the fish, as much as they wanted. And when they were full, he told his disciples, collect the leftovers so nothing is wasted. And they collected and filled 12 baskets with the pieces from the 5 loaves that were left over. And when the people saw the sign that he had done, they said, this truly is the prophet who has come into the world. Therefore, when Jesus realized they were about to come and take him by force and make him the king, He withdrew again to the mountain by himself. The people had a utilitarian appreciation of what Jesus could do. Man, if we made this full king, we would never be hungry again. Look what Jesus can provide for us. There's great utility in that. And so Jesus crosses over and goes to another place. And much of the crowd comes and follows him. And look at how Jesus responds to them following after him. Jesus answered, this is the next day, truly I tell you, you are looking for me, not because you saw the signs, but because you ate the loaves and were filled. You're not coming to me for what I can actually offer you, which is spiritual redemption and renewal. You're coming to me for bread. Don't work for the food that perishes, but for the food that lasts for eternal life, which the Son of Man will give you, because God the Father has set his seal of approval on him. What can we do to perform the works of God, they asked. And Jesus replied, this is the work of God, that you believe in the one he has sent. What sign then are you going to do so that we may see and believe in you? They asked. What are you going to perform? Our ancestors ate manna in the wilderness, just as it is written, he gave them bread from heaven to eat. And Jesus said to them, truly, I tell you, Moses didn't give you the bread from heaven, but my Father gives you the bread from heaven. For the bread of God is the one who comes down from heaven and gives life to the world. And they said, give us this bread always. And Jesus said, I am the bread of life. This is an amazing passage. Truly, I tell you, you're looking for me not because you saw the signs, but because you ate the loaves and you were filled. And the people who, 12 hours ago saw 5 loaves turn into enough food to feed 20,000 people, who just saw a massive sign, a massive miracle, are like, okay, well, what sign are you going to perform for us so we know that we can actually believe in you?
Wow.
Jesus is like, do y'all have amnesia? 12 hours ago, I turned a Happy Meal into a buffet for 20,000 of y'all. What do you mean, what kind of sign? And here's the danger of not being able to move past a utilitarian appreciation of Jesus is nothing will ever be enough. You follow Jesus down the path of forgiveness and you achieve success beyond your wildest dreams in your next endeavor. But it's not enough. You want another sign. And you follow Jesus in this one way, and it releases anxiety. And you think, man, that's great. Jesus sure was a great teacher, but it's not enough. At some point, we have to switch from what can Jesus do for me to how do I submit my life to Jesus? You didn't come for the signs. You just came for the bread. We think that life will be found in what we can get from Jesus. However, the ultimate truth that Jesus demonstrated with his own life is that the truest form of life is found when we can give ourselves away for the sake of others. And so, look, I think we should rejoice. I think we should be so happy that Logan is having this experience of Jesus, that it was meaningful for him. He even felt like he'd be ridiculed by his boys in the room. He'd be ridiculed by the internet, which, by the way, whole nother topic, really says a lot about where the culture is, that the number one influencer in the world thinks if he mentions the name of Jesus, the entire internet is going to get after him. I have quite a few comments on quite a few videos that can back up that claim. He kind of knows where the culture is at, but he says it anyway. And he's honest about this experience of Jesus. And my prayer for him is that he will move from this utilitarian experience of Jesus into a true life change, submitting himself to the Savior of the world. Good information is hard to find in the fog of war. However, when it was reported that Israel had bombed a civilian hospital, killing over 500 innocent people, it was possibly the most egregious misinformation since the alleged weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. So how did everyone get this wrong? And what does this expose about the perverse incentives guiding the media today? Things are escalating so quickly in the Middle East, and we have Russia and Iran who have been holding hands for some time now, and China is involved in that at some level, and we are sending warships over into that area of the world, and China is now sending warships, and all of this continues to escalate. And so much of war centers around propaganda, and what propaganda is meant to do is change the hearts and the minds of the people within the countries who you are at odds with. And I might do one of these segments, one of these weeks, just about all of the marches and rallies and the things we're seeing and the division between those who are pro-Israel and those who are pro-Palestine, and how to have some version of a nuanced view of that. And if you're versed in scripture at all, you know that this goes all the way back to the book of Genesis and to Abraham. And this is a religious conflict that is rooted so much deeper than almost anyone in the West can actually appreciate. And what happened over the last week is there was a hospital that was allegedly bombed, 500 innocent civilians dead. And I mean, this was on the front page of every major news network website. Most of the podcasters were talking about it. It was scrolling across the news, breaking news on all of the sites, and it ended up being far, far from accurate. Let's look at some reporting on this. This says, Hamas lied. Number of estimated deaths at Gaza hospital hit by rocket lower than Palestinian claims, reports say. The Hamas-run Palestinian Health Ministry claimed earlier this week that Israel targeted a hospital in Gaza, dropped a bomb on it, and killed more than 500 people. Okay, so Israel targeted a hospital, dropped a bomb on it, and killed more than 500 people. Those are the claims. Democrats, legacy news publications, and notorious anti-Semitic propagandists instantly made the claims go viral Tuesday night on social media. Every aspect of what the Palestinians claimed happened has effectively been debunked through evidence and refuted in statements released by Israeli officials, U.S. officials, and now European officials. The Israel Defense Forces released evidence showing that the explosion was not caused by an aerial bomb and did not strike the hospital. It exploded in a parking lot. It also released intercepted communications from Hamas terrorists who said the explosion was caused by a rocket fired by the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. U.S. intelligence later confirmed that it had satellite and other infrared data showing a launch of a rocket or missile from Palestinian fighters positioned within Gaza, according to a report from the New York Times. AFP reported that a European intelligence agency told the publication there wasn't 200 or even 500 deaths, more likely between 10 and 50. And so here were the claims that Israel targeted a hospital, that Israel dropped a bomb, and that 500 people had died. And the reality is the rocket came from Gaza, from Hamas, not from Israel, that it wasn't targeting the hospital at all. It was trying to shoot it into Israel. There are reports that up to 25% of the rockets that are fired from Gaza don't make it into Israel. And that's because these are not super sophisticated rockets. We have learned from propaganda videos from Hamas themselves that the hundreds of millions of dollars of humanitarian aid that have come into them have largely been used to reinforce their fighting, including like all the water pipes that were supposed to create a water system for them, used to refashion into rockets to shoot into Israel. And a lot of these rockets fail, and it didn't hit the hospital at all. It hit the parking lot next to the hospital, and 500 people didn't die. It was like something like a dozen people. And of course, anyone who dies is a huge tragedy, and we should mourn the loss of death as believers in Jesus always. What I'm focused on in this segment is the massive misinformation that came out. I mean, some of what are supposed to be the most respected news outlets taking the word of Hamas, taking the word of terrorists, and just running with it. And so here's an idea. I know this is crazy. I'm not trying to reshape the world here, but maybe we should fact check terrorists.
Wow.
Hamas and the Gaza Ministry of Health, they are notorious for putting out false propagandistic information. They haven't even hidden this. There has been intel from the past where the Gaza Ministry of Health says, whoever dies, call them a civilian, because if it's a civilian, it gets the sympathy of the world. However many people die, inflate the number, because that gets the sympathy of the world. And within minutes of this bomb going off, they had a number, 500 dead. There's no way you could have even found that out, but we run for it, and we run for it so quickly. And these mainstream media outlets, they put this out, and it further destabilizes the Middle East in a massive way. And it creates more riots in the Middle East, and it puts embassies in danger. In a very real sense, this kind of information, non-fact checked, put out without fact checking the terrorists, has put blood on the hands of the major news networks who ran with this. It is beyond irresponsible. In the book of Proverbs, it says, the simple believe anything, but the prudent give thought to their steps. The prudent fact check their information. The prudent care about accuracy. And what we have is a media environment. And a lot of this is because of the advent of social media. And social media is like instant media. And now all of us are kind of street level reporters, and all of us have platforms. And used to, like 3 people had platforms, and those were the 3 major news networks. And news came on at 6 p.m. and everyone sat around a television and watched it, and everyone largely trusted it. Now news is 24 hours and news is big business, and its competition is not 2 other networks. When the competition is 2 other networks, there is incentive to get your ducks in a row and to put out accurate information, because if you're the most accurate news source, then people will go to you instead of the others. Now, the major incentive is not accuracy. The major incentive is speed. And speed is often in competition with accuracy. You know this all the way back to elementary school, that if your goal every time you take a test is to be the first one to turn it into the teacher, if every assignment that you're given is a race to you, then that speed is often in competition with your accuracy. You forget to put your name on the paper. You fill in the wrong bubble. You don't check your work because you just got to get in as fast as possible. This is just true in life, and it's certainly true in media. And look, when you're doing a story about the presidential election, and there is a report that some crazy thing came out about Trump, some crazy thing came out about Biden, and you just completely throw accuracy to the wind so you can be the first to the story, that has consequences. It's not good, but the consequences are contained. When you're putting out information that is very similar to like a blood libel, Israel, who there's already so much controversy around, is targeting a civilian hospital with no warning, which doesn't even sound like Israel, who goes out of their way to not cause civilian casualties. When you just put that out, you're putting lives at risk. Genuinely, you are causing lives, because you've got to be the first to the story. Proverbs 19 says, a false witness will not go unpunished, and whoever pours out lies will perish. And James, the half-brother of Jesus, said this, my dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen and slow to speak and slow to become angry. And, you know, I'm one guy with a small YouTube channel. I can't control what the mainstream media is going to do. And this won't be the last time that they put out egregiously wrong information that costs people their life. I just think that's a fact. I don't think they're going to learn from this. I think that they will continue prioritizing speed over accuracy, because their competition is not just NBC and ABC. Their competition is every single person who has a smartphone in their pocket with social media apps loaded up on it. Their competition is the whole world now, and they've got to be first to the story. And so accuracy out the window, speed, speed, speed. I don't think this will be the last time. So here's my encouragement to us on the ground, to us normal people. Quell your reactions until the facts come out, especially about this war. It's so difficult to get good information. That's why the term the fog of war exists. It's just difficult to see things clearly. It's difficult to know what's accurate. And propaganda is a very real thing that is being put out in force. So we as individuals should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and maybe most importantly, we should be very, very slow to become angry. The Republican-run House of Representatives has been plagued with speaker issues from the beginning. With McCarthy's recent ouster, they've struggled to find the votes for a replacement. 2 small groups on opposite ideological sides have sabotage power, and they are using it to their advantage. Is an inherently wrong view of the speaker's role what is actually to blame? Now, this is probably the most boring story I've ever gone over on this podcast. This video will probably get 6 views.
Wow.
But I do think it's important, and I think it's important to understand. And I think if we dig under a few layers, there is some wisdom that we can learn from the House's current lack of wisdom that could be helpful to our lives. The Republicans have the majority in the House of Representatives, but it's a very small majority. They only have 212 people, and you need 217 votes to elect a speaker. So all that means is 5 Republicans can sabotage any vote for anyone that they don't like. And the Republican Party is far from in lockstep with one another across policies. They have a lot of different ideas. There are MAGA Republicans, or, Trump supporting Republicans, really far right conservative Republicans. There are moderate Republicans who are kind of like keep taxes low, Chamber of Commerce Republicans. There are pretty left-leaning Republicans. They can't fully get on board with the ideologies of the Democrats, so they still consider themselves a Republican, but they're voted in from very, very purple states. And so socially, often they're very liberal, and then fiscally, they're often very conservative. So you have a wide range across the Republican Party. And what's happening is the Republicans will put up someone like McCarthy, who was seen, right or wrong, was seen by some of the very furthest conservative Republicans as being too left-leaning, too conciliatory towards Biden. And so they ousted him, and he couldn't get his position back because there were about 5 to 8 Republicans who are not going to vote, and you got to get to 217. So then they put someone who's way more conservative, Jim Jordan, who is someone who is in good graces with Donald Trump, someone who that side of the party could really appreciate. Then the people who are in purple districts, who are more socially liberal, it only took 5 of them. And Jim Jordan, after 3 rounds of voting, was not able to get it. And this is the problem. And now it's like everyone and their dog is going to run for Speaker of the House. And it's going to be difficult for any of them to get it, because these tiny minorities, like 5 people out of 221, that's a very, very small percentage of people, 2% of the party, can now stop all the proceedings. And the House of Representatives has kind of ground to a halt. And the Republicans, who do have the majority in that House and could be influencing policy to some degree with a Democrat Senate and a Democrat president, just have their hands in their pockets as they're trying to figure out their own drama and their own mess. The Washington Post is reporting that this is going really poorly for them, and it's showing in the polls. It says, what polls show about the impact of the GOP speaker drama so far? The way things in Congress work these days, everything appears hopeless and unresolvable right up until the moment it gets resolved. All of that said, Republicans have left themselves few options for electing a new speaker and getting out of the mess they've created. Tensions and factionalism appear to be on the rise as Republican Jim Jordan's bid struggles, with a solution arguably now more elusive. And with more than 2 weeks having passed since Kevin McCarthy's ouster, it's fair at this point to start examining the potential political impact. So there've been over 2 weeks now without a speaker. They can't get it figured out. Is this whole drama, while it's rather inside baseball, not many people are following it, but a Yahoo News / YouGov poll released Tuesday showed just 17% of Americans said they were following the situation very closely. Again, this is going to be... Why am I doing this segment? I don't know. It's interesting to me. It's my podcast. I do what I want. But one doesn't have to understand the arcane procedures of the House to grasp the very basic facts here. Those facts are that the Republicans have struggled in a historic way to execute what is quite literally the first order of business for the one lever of lawmaking power they control right now. That's what's so crazy about this. This is all you guys have right now. You don't have the Senate. You don't have the presidency. You don't have a lot of popular opinion in many ways. You've got this one thing, and the very first thing you're supposed to do, like a year and a half ago, you still haven't completed. And this is affecting them, and it could genuinely affect future elections. And so it's boring as Speaker of the House, and what do they even do, and who really cares? But this could have effect on the Republicans long term. And so if you're a Republican, you should be paying attention to that. If you're a Democrat, then you might be happy about all this. To the extent this becomes even more prolonged, there are signs it could register with voters. A CNN poll conducted in the week after McCarthy's ouster showed disapproval of Republicans in Congress rising to 74%.
Wow.
74%. 3 out of every 4 people are unhappy with the Republicans in Congress. Guys, that's horrible. That's up from mid to high 60s in recent years, and it's tied for the party's highest congressional disapproval since 2012. Democrats' disapproval is at 64%. That's also up very high, but the GOP is 10 points higher. A Quinnipiac University poll released Tuesday also speaks to this. It asked whether the two parties put party over country or country over party with their actions in Congress. In both cases, Americans viewed the parties as mostly looking out for themselves. But while they said this about Democrats, a 34-point margin, they said it about Republicans by a 50-point margin. So no one trusts Congress. Everyone thinks these Congress people are out for themselves anyway. Everyone has a bad taste in their mouth. 64% of Democrats, 74% of Republicans. They don't trust the people in Congress. They're not actually representing us. They're representing all the lobbyists who write them the biggest checks. They don't actually care about the common good of most people. That's not true for everybody. It is true for a lot of them. And now they can't do the most basic functioning. And I think that at the bottom of all of this is a misunderstanding of what the role of the Speaker of the House actually is. Like why the Republicans are finding themselves in this incredibly embarrassing situation is they don't understand what the role of the Speaker is. And the role of the Speaker is an organizer. They lead the House, they call the sessions, they set the agenda, they keep things in order. It's a very important position in the fact that it is third in line to the presidency. It goes president, vice president, Speaker of the House. Right now, we don't have one of those. And so, if something happened to Kamala and Joe, I don't even know what would happen right now because there's not a third in line because the Republicans can't get their stuff in order to elect somebody to that positions. Do Republicans have a misunderstanding of what the role of the Speaker is? And based on the narratives around the people who have tried to get into the position, I think the answer to that is yes. And here's why. The Speaker of the House is a curator, not a creator. The Speaker of the House is a curator, not a creator. And they are talking about the Speaker as if they create. We need someone who is super duper conservative so that we can create the legislation. We need someone who is more moderate so that we can create an environment where we're not going to lose our House seats in purple districts. The Speaker of the House doesn't create things. They curate things. This is why typically speakers of the House have been somewhere closer to center in their parties. Not always, but often, because what the Speaker of the House has to do is take, like in the Republicans' case right now, 221 people who all have their own agendas, who all have their own views of policies, who probably have more disagreements than even agreements, and has to curate them, has to put them all together and organize an agenda and organize priorities in a way that the Congress can hypothetically actually get something done. The main goal shouldn't even be the political priorities of the Speaker of the House. It should be their skill set in herding cats and organizing disparate people with different views. And I think if we understood the role of the Speaker well, we would have a different set of priorities in who we put in that position in order to be most effective. And here's what's true. If you misunderstand someone's role, you will not be able to measure their success. If you misunderstand someone's role, you will not be able to measure their success. There are times where people act like their kids' teachers should also be their parents. And so we are frustrated because they are not teaching their kid outside the scope of academia. That's their role. It's academics. And if we don't understand exactly what their role is, we won't be able to measure their success. This is why a job description is actually important in a work environment. If you don't know what your role is, then you can't measure your success and your supervisor can't measure your success. If you don't know what your supervisor is supposed to do, then you don't know if you have a good supervisor or a bad one. This happens all the time. The youth pastor is not supposed to be the primary spiritual developer of your children. You are, as the parent. And if you don't understand your role and their role, you won't be able to measure their success. And we have a very, very interesting version of this exact problem in Scripture when it comes to Jesus and one of his 12 disciples, the disciple named Judas. It says this in Matthew 26, while Jesus was in Bethany at the house of Simon the leper, a woman approached him with an alabaster jar of very expensive perfume, and she poured it on his head as he was reclining at the table. And when the disciples saw it, they were indignant. Why this waste? They asked. This might have been sold for a great deal and given to the poor. Aware of this, Jesus said to them, why are you bothering this woman? She's done a noble thing for me. You always have the poor with you, but you do not always have me. By pouring this perfume on my body, she has prepared me for burial. Truly, I tell you, wherever this gospel is proclaimed in the whole world, what she has done will also be told in memory of her. And then one of the 12, the man called Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests and said, what are you willing to give me if I hand Jesus over to you? And they weighed out 30 pieces of silver for him. And from that time, he started looking for a good opportunity to betray Jesus. It's so interesting that this is the moment that Judas has had enough. And Judas was a zealot. He was looking for a Messiah who was going to come in and create a subterfuge that would take out the Roman Empire. He wanted someone who would come in force. He wanted a warrior who would be king. Jesus keeps talking about dying. If Jesus is dead, he's no good to Judas. Not only that, Judas is the treasurer. We learn in the other gospels that he was actually stealing from the treasury. He had a greed problem. And Jesus is like not good with his money. That's Judas' view. He's like taking a year's worth of money in perfume and just letting this woman dump it on his feet, right? So Judas didn't understand Jesus' role. And so to Judas, he was a failure. Judas thought Jesus was supposed to be a king and a warrior, and therefore he believed that Jesus had failed miserably. We got to get clarity on the roles in the government. What roles do our Congress people play, and are they playing it? And if not, let's vote some people in who will play that role, which is to actually represent us. There are representatives. That's what they're called. They don't represent the lobbies and big business. They don't represent the pharmaceutical industry. They represent us first and foremost. Our voice to the government is our Congress people. So let's get people. The Speaker of the House is a curator. If we understand that, then we can put together the expectations and priorities of what that looks like. We could get a surprising person in there who is the best that we have because we understand the role. If you don't understand the role, you will not be able to measure success. Now, let's get to our last segment. These days, TikTok is filled with Gen Zers, and I hate to admit it, but even many of my fellow millennials who feel like they are somehow owed a six-figure job and a comfortable life simply for existing on planet Earth. These videos are kind of fun to cringe at and make fun of, but I believe they are pointing at a much deeper issue that is showing itself in all corners of society. This video went viral over the last couple of weeks, and once again, I'm going to try to be on point with my censor button. We'll see how well I do.
I have a bone to pick with America. So I'm headed to my serving job. Fucking hate it. Maybe why I make more money serving. I have my literal business marketing degree that put me in a cute $80,000 in debt. And I make more serving sushi rolls because I've been applying to marketing for weeks now, and the pay cut is insane. But the jobs that are like a cute 150 to 200,000 a year, I'm not getting those. I'm a almost 25-year-old. My birthday soon. Almost 25-year-old chick going against, corporate America. People with so much experience. All I got is my degree. People say, get your degree, but then they don't talk about how you need experience. The degree was the experience. I need to relax.
The degree was the experience. Oh man, there's so much about this. Number one, when I talk about money from now on, I will only use the adjective cute.
Wow.
How much is that bagel? Oh, it's a cute $4.50. I just played this gig. I got paid a cute $400. Obviously just cringe, and we could take apart every single part of this. But what's important for you to know, if you're normal and you understand how life works. This sentiment, while crazy, is also prevalent. And there is this idea that we are owed something. Confucius is believed to have said, I hear and I forget. I see and I remember. I do and I understand. She said, I can't get a $200,000 job, even though I've been to college and I have the degree, and the degree is the experience. Confucius says, I hear and I forget. I sit in lectures in my business marketing class, and I hear it and I forget it. I see it and I remember. I actually see it in action. Maybe this is an internship or an apprenticeship where you actually get to see it happen. I do it and I understand. I put the weight of it on me and I understand. I have actual responsibility and I understand. There is no substitute for actual real lived experience. The other idea is, I like that she won't tell her age. I'm like a 20 to 25-year-old chick is what she says. Such a mystery, you know. I'm going to guess 21, but 20 to 25-year-old. I'm going to hope 21 based on the maturity level here. I'm like 20 to 25. This is also always how I'm going to tell my age. I'm somewhere between like 27 and 47. That's how I'm going to tell my age. I'm like a cute 30-something. I hear and forget. I see and I remember. I do and I understand. Proverbs 19 says, desire without knowledge is not good. And whoever makes haste with his feet misses his way. Experience does actually matter. And this gets to the deeper root of why so much of Gen Z and younger millennials feel like, look, I did my 4 years in college. Someone hand me $200,000 a year. You know, I'm here, I exist. Somebody hand me a comfortable life. It's because we no longer view society like the thing we live in. We no longer view society as something that we belong to and have responsibility toward. We now see society as something that is meant solely to serve us. And that is new in the scope of human history. There is a great sociologist who broke down human history into these different categories. There was like primitive man who basically just worried about survival. Out of that, there was religious man who saw themselves, this is about your view of yourself, saw themselves as belonging to their larger spiritual community and having responsibility towards them. Then the Industrial Revolution brought us industrial man, which saw yourself with a responsibility to your community, to the broader world with the product or services that you were offering, and to your family and your friends as a contributing member of society. And now we have moved into the category of psychological man. And this is a change within all of human history. Primitive man and religious man and industrial man, they all viewed their identity from the outside in. I belong to a society, I have responsibilities to a community, and that informs who I am and my identity. Psychological man sees themselves from the inside out. And now society and the community around us, our family, friends, our cities, states, and countries, it's not something we have a responsibility towards. It's not something we carry weight for. Now we think from the inside out. Society is something that's supposed to be pointed at me and focused on me and serving me and me only. In Ecclesiastes, Solomon shares this insightful, sometimes depressing wisdom. In Ecclesiastes 9:11, he says, I've seen something else under the sun. The race is not to the swift. The battle is not to the strong, nor does food come to the wise, or wealth to the brilliant, or favor to the learned. But time and chance happen to them all. You can be the best, the brightest, the most degrees, the most brilliant, the most influential, and things still might not go your way. There is time and there is chance and there is circumstance. There is need for patience. And ultimately, the idea that we have responsibility to others is rooted in our responsibility toward God. However, we've replaced worship of God with worship of the self, which means we've replaced responsibility towards God with others being responsible to us. We are a culture historically of rights and responsibilities. And we only worry about half of that equation now. We want a cute $200,000 salary and we want it now. And who cares that I don't have the experience? And who cares that I have a grating personality that would be very difficult to work with? And who cares that others have put in their time in order to ascend to those positions? And who cares about any of it? I'm here and I want it, so give it to me. I'm psychological man. I view my identity entirely by what's inside of me. I don't worry about my place in society. I don't worry about the community around me, and I don't worry about my responsibility to others. The call to come and to follow after Jesus is a call to deny yourself. And I think obviously that's mattered for 2,000 years. Jesus gave that command 2,000 years ago. It matters maybe more than ever today, because for primitive man and religious man and industrial man, as these categories of self-identity, we had to deny ourselves, but we already saw ourselves as responsible to others. For psychological man, we are only ourselves. We are each man an island, completely forming our identity psychologically from within ourselves. To deny ourselves is one of the greatest calls, because we believe that we have our own truth and our own identity and our own reality and our own morality. We can just come up with all these things whole cloth, and Jesus says you must deny yourself. You got to get out of your own head. You got to realize who you are in respect to the people and community around you, and deny yourself and take up your cross. This is a call to intentionally suffer for the good and the sake of those who are around you. It is a call to get your eyes off of yourself and to get your eyes on the people around you, and to live like Jesus, giving your life away for the benefit of others, even at great cost to yourself. Society is not built just to help you and just to make you succeed and just to fulfill your every wish. Society is there for you to have an impact on with the God-given gifts and purposes that are inside of you. I want to thank you for tuning in to episode 36 of the Clayton Tyner podcast. I want to remind you to subscribe to the channel. Things are growing. They're growing quickly. I'm so happy with what's going on here. Also, I'm really trying to create this community where I offer even more content to you. And in exchange, you come in a subscription model and help support the work that's going on. So number one, we stop losing money making the podcast, and maybe we can even continually improve it as we go down. And you can do that by going to patreon.com/Clayton Tyner. That's Tyner. The link is in the description below. You can get exclusive content, early access to some content, live monthly Q&As where we all jump in a Google Meet together. And instead of just listening to me for an hour, we actually get to talk and hang out. I'm so excited about all that. Patreon.com/Clayton Tyner. I love you guys, and I hope to see you next week on episode 37.